Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Egyptian Vulture Online Conference 2022, our second day. I'm Vladimir SPB, Wife Egyptian Vulture Conservation Officer in Bulgaria, and I'm delighted to be able to welcome you to the second day of our conference. Yesterday, we listened to so many interesting presentations from around the range of the Egyptian vulture, namely learning about the status of the species in many countries throughout Europe, Africa, and Asia, and getting to understand some of the main threats and the mitigation measures that have been undertaken to tackle them. We also had so many interesting questions in our Q&A sessions, fruitful discussions at the roundtables, and so much going on. Thank you very much for being here with us today. In order to keep up with the high spirit and everything that we have learned so far, we're now going to pay attention to the major threat to all scavengers, namely poisoning. More interesting topics are coming afterwards, so make sure that you stay with us until the end. You won't regret it, I promise. And now I'm not going to waste any more time, and I'm quite delighted to introduce our first speaker. Enjoy.
Hi, my name is Victoria Sarabia Mullen. I work for HOS BirdLife Greece as a project coordinator for the Egyptian Vulture New Life project. I will be presenting you today an overview of the work against wildlife poisoning that has been carried out in Greece in the framework of the different projects for the Egyptian vulture. Wildlife poisoning is indeed a huge issue in Greece, especially for scavenger species. As you can see on the map, we have recorded over 1,150 poisoning incidents since the year 2000 until now. When we look into the species affected by this illegal practice, we see that predators are obviously highly affected, only to be expected because they are usually the target species of this practice. We also see how vulture species are affected, obviously due to their, even though they're not usually the target species, they are affected because of their dietary habits. And we also see how dogs are in fact the group which is more affected by this illegal practice. And how does poisoning affect Egyptian vultures? When we look at the population trend in Greece for the past 20 years, we see that in the year 2000, around 100 breeding pairs were still in the country, whereas nowadays we have only 4 breeding pairs left. But then when we look into the causes of those Egyptian vultures that have been found either dead or injured since the year 2000, we see that practically 60% of these individuals were actually poisoned. So what are the drivers behind the use of poison in Greece? We've seen how wildlife conflict is an issue. So causes in livestock, beehives, game or crops. Also trying to kill working dogs due to land use conflicts. Killing feral dogs is also one of the main drivers. Trying to control fox populations due to the problems they create on game and during the hunting dog training. And finally, and surprisingly, trying to solve personal disputes. So land users behind this practice include livestock breeders, hunters, beekeepers, farmers, but also just neighbors. So basically anybody in the countryside might be using poison. A real eye-opener for us was the case of Lazarus, which was an Egyptian vulture who back in the year 2012 was found poisoned in central Greece. We managed to save it, put a satellite transmitter on its back, only to find it again poisoned less than 1 year afterwards. So for us, we realized that if one bird can be poisoned twice in less than 1 year, this is really a huge problem. So we really need to change the way we are doing things. We really need a new approach. So we decided to implement a multi-level approach that basically works or stands on the 3 pylons. The first of which is knowledge. We need to know when, why, and how are people using poison. We need to stop, deter people from using poison. This could be through law enforcement, this could be through increasing their awareness about the problem. And obviously we need to prosecute the people that are using poison baits, because we must never forget that poison baits are illegal, and this is an important wildlife crime, and it needs to be prosecuted. All these pillars, of course, are interrelated between one another. So the different actions that we started implementing advocacy and policy actions in order to increase our knowledge, focus on prevention, but also prosecution. So one of our first steps was the creation of a national anti-poison task force created by 7 different organizations and institutions in Greece, NGOs, environmental NGOs. What we tried was to press the authorities to start doing their job regarding this illegal practice, to propose changes in the legal framework. After many years of pressure, local action plans against wildlife poisoning were finally endorsed in Greece. These action plans set action protocols and distribute responsibilities among national and local authorities. This is, of course, a huge step for us, but we want that these action plans don't remain only in paper, but are actively implemented by authorities. In order to increase our knowledge and also help prosecution, we created a database on recording all poisoning incidents. Initially, it was a national database. Now it's been expanded to the whole of the Balkans. It's now online, and it's in the form of a map. So anybody can visit this website and check where poisoning incidents are taking place. Right now, the database and the map is maintained by us, but the aim is for it to be managed at some point by the Ministry of Environment. Also, a huge step for us was the creation and operation of 2 anti-poison dog units in Greece for the first time back in 2014. This comes as part of the actions that are needed for enforcement of the law. As you can see, the anti-poison dog units were very successful, nearly 500 patrols carried out in Greece. And what was more successful was that since then, many other new anti-poison dog units have been created in Greece. Here you can see a map with all the different dog units that are in operation right now in Greece, either by conservation NGOs such as ours, or in green, the ones that have just been newly created by the Ministry of Environment. Regarding prevention and deterrence, we decided to focus our efforts on the driver of human-wildlife conflict. So we thought that it would be very useful to provide livestock breeders with alternative methods to poison to solve their conflicts with predators. One of the first methods we decided to try was the distribution of livestock guarding dogs of Greek breeds, basically Molossus oviparous and Greek Shepherd dog, because we had noticed that livestock breeders were more and more often using breeds of dogs that come from other areas and are not so well adapted to the mountains of Greece, to the weather of Greece. So we combined our efforts with the conservation NGO Callisto, who's been practicing this action for many years now. And we started distributing these dogs among livestock breeders. Over 120 dogs were distributed. Here you can see one of the little puppies that we gave to one of the livestock breeders, and you can see how it evolved and grew up into a great, very effective livestock guard dog. The second method that we tried was the flood dry fences. This is a method that's been used in US and Canada against wolves. So as you can see from the photographs, it's basically just it's a fence with red flags hanging from a piece of rope, which frightens away wolves. These fences can be either the simple version or what is known as turbo version, which is just an electrified fence, the same but electrified. So what we did was we adapted it. We made changes to the designs in order to it to be more resistant to the Greek weather. It had never been tried before in Greece by livestock breeders. And we saw it was particularly useful for transhuman stock breeders due to the temporality of the method. So wolves, after 2-3 months, they kind of get used to the presence of these fences, and they're not effective anymore against wolves. We monitored the efficiency of this method with trap cameras, and here you can see a wolf scared away by one of our floodlights. The third method that we tried were fox lights. This method had been first designed in Australia, and it has been proved that it's very efficient against different types of predators. It had never been tried before in Greece by livestock breeders, and these devices just basically emit random flashes of light which imitate human presence. So obviously they're effective during the night, and they are charged with little solar panels that they have on the top of the device. Again, we monitored their efficiency with trap cameras. So we carried out an assessment of the 3 methods using questionnaires. When we asked them, would they prefer fox lights, flood ray or turbo flood ray, based on the easiness of installation, how easy livestock adapted to their presence, how efficient they were against wolves. Fox lights were the most preferred method, then turbo flood ray, and finally flood ray. When comparing all methods, most livestock breeders preferred to use a combination of methods, although we saw how a large proportion of livestock breeders did rely completely on livestock guarding dogs. And even those using a combination of methods all said that the basic method was livestock guarding dogs plus something else. So when we asked them if Greek breeds were better, 82% answered yes. And when we asked them would they continue to use them, 71 of them answered yes. Out of 25% weren't sure if they would continue to use, not because they didn't rely on these breeds, but because they were aware of how difficult it is to find one of the Greek breeds. And those answering no, it was basically because these people were actually going to retire. So we also carried out awareness actions with, again, with local stakeholders, livestock breeders, hunters, public authorities, because we believe that informed stakeholders are our best allies against poisoning. So what we did, we distributed materials, information obviously, but we distributed materials and services that would help them in their everyday life and would help them to protect themselves against either predators or against even poisoning. We also distributed tools among relevant authorities that will to help them manage a poisoning event. We obviously needed to have authorities properly trained. If they don't know what they're fighting against, they can't be expected to do their job correctly. So we carried out many training seminars to police, forestry services, vet services. We even took people abroad to be trained by other police from other countries or forestry services from other countries. So again, focusing on prevention and deterrence, we carried out actions to increase awareness in younger generations. So we carried out lots of environmental activities at schools. We created a specific environmental education on the Egyptian vulture, but more specifically on wildlife poisoning. This kit was distributed among more than 100 schools in our project areas. We carried out different activities and events for kids where we reached over 6,000 kids all over our project areas. More awareness actions included the production of printed and audiovisual material. Here, obviously, targeting the wider public in general. These materials wanted to inform people about the impact of the use of poison baits. We worked a lot on media, social media, on television, and internet, and carried out many events at local level. So what are the challenges for anti-poison work in Greece? Those that we have found and those we will still continue to find in front of us. It's not considered as an important environmental crime. There's a huge lack of political will and commitment, although we have seen a change during the last few years. There's a very low level of law enforcement, mainly due to understaffed authorities with very limited resources, and a lack of general infrastructure and expertise. So there are no specialized law enforcement officers. Toxicological laboratories are really lacking. There's only one toxicological laboratory for the whole country, with very limited staff and resources. Compensation schemes for damages created by large carnivores in livestock are quite inefficient. Public awareness is very low, and involvement of local communities is very low. There's a really high tolerance from local communities on the matter of poisoning. Very low administrative and criminal penalties. So you can kill the last Egyptian vulture in Greece and just pay 200 euros for doing that as a fine. And unfortunately, almost zero cases reach the court. So is there hope in Greece to put a stop to wildlife poisoning? We think there is, because local action plans against poisoning were approved in 2018 by the Ministry of Environment as a ministerial decision, but now have been upgraded this year in 2020 to a joint ministerial decision to increase their effectiveness. We have also seen the Ministry of Environment again this year create anti-poison dog units in different areas of Greece. So hopefully in some years we will see a picture like this one taken this year in Bulgaria. So we hope we will be able to see something like this in Greece in not too many years. Many thanks for your attention and time.
Hello, my name is Ivailo Angelov from BSPB. I would like to bring your attention to the possible link between the killing of stray dogs and Egyptian vulture population declines worldwide. Egyptian vultures have long been associated during their feeding on the ground with stray dogs, as we see from this citation from 200 years ago from Egypt. We know that 55,000 people die from rabies each year. At the same time, there are estimated 200 million stray dogs in the world, and we kill probably tens of millions of stray dogs every year by shooting, poisoning, mostly these two ways. Poisoning of stray dogs have in response to rabies has started early in the history of pharaonic Egypt, so thousands of years ago. And the table below shows some statistics from papers that I found on the internet about the number of dogs killed per country. You can see for Egypt, only for 4 years, 1 million dogs have been killed. In Sudan, in Morocco, again 1 million, but for a bit larger time span, more than 10 years. And these are only the official statistics, and mostly they are for part of the country, not for the whole country. So you can see what a massive scale this is. And now on the internet you can find cases of stories like 58,000 dogs poisoned in Baghdad in 2008, 12,000 in Addis Ababa, this we know thanks to Ilma, our colleague from Ethiopia, 100 dogs to be killed in Kashmir to fight rabies. Many cases like that can be found if you start searching. the killing of dogs is definitely condemned and not a good way to control rabies. It's highly inefficient. Soon after, first that it's killing also all of the vaccinated dogs, and on the other hand, soon after, the areas are repopulated by other dogs, and the population is very quickly reaching its previous level. And we know that the percentage of stray dogs is higher at rubbish dumps and slaughterhouses than elsewhere, which makes them target areas during poisoning campaigns, and which makes Egyptian vultures very vulnerable to poisoning. Also, Egyptian the poison dogs are frequently disposed on at the rubbish dumps. Egyptian vultures are highly attracted to the rubbish dumps. This we know for sure. And in recent decades, concentrations of hundreds of Egyptian vultures at rubbish dumps have been observed at least in Spain, Turkey, Uzbekistan, Ethiopia, Somalia, Yemen, Oman, India, Nepal. You can see these are thousands and thousands of Egyptian vultures that depend on the rubbish dumps and that are every day vulnerable to the possible poisoning of mass poisoning of stray dogs. Not to talk that also they are potentially exposed to every other poisoned animal that is reaching in any way the rubbish dump. In other countries, tens of Egyptian vultures were recorded. These are Macedonia, Israel, Greece, Egypt, Sudan, Djibouti, Iran. Vultures are more vulnerable to these types of poisoning because of their foraging habits. This nice photo is showing number of Egyptian vultures on the rubbish dump, and in a case like that, in 1994, more than 60 Egyptian vultures were poisoned in a single day at a rubbish dump in North Macedonia. Our colleague Bratislav Grubac was there at that time. I recorded this case, and this was considered half of the national population of North Macedonia at that time. Imagine what catastrophic consequences the poisoning of stray dogs on rubbish dumps may have for whole national populations. And we know that these countries in these continents have cases of poisoning of Egyptian vultures on rubbish dumps, or probably have cases because such poisoning campaigns occur there. However, the poisoning of dogs is widespread, but we have very little information because normally we don't go there, and the information that we gather is very sporadic, and we miss 99.99% of all that is happening and all that is important about the vultures there. A very curious fact is that countries like Oman and Socotra Island and Yemen, due to cultural reasons, in these places there are no dogs, and it happens that there are also no other large mammalian predators, and these places, these areas, have healthy Egyptian vulture population, and you can see the link here. So what is the way forward? We can talk about what we can do in the future to gather more data, and what else can we do? What more information do we have that we don't know? Thank you for your attention.
Good day and greetings from Southern Africa. Andre Botha here from the Endangered Wildlife Trust. I'm going to talk to you about the use of tracked vultures as a conservation management tool in Africa. The work that we do here under the program Vultures for Africa works towards achieving some of the objectives of the Multi-Species Action Plan for Vultures. And you can see the numbers of the objectives in particular that is relevant in this discussion. We have specific activities that links to this. Within the Multi-Species Action Plan, in particular here that's relevant is the undertaking of GPS or satellite tracking studies of vultures, assessing the poisoning threat, and then deriving poisoning protocols, training people in it, and ensuring and increasing the capacity to detect these incidents so that we can reduce the impact of poisoning. Since the publication of the Multi-Species Action Plan, there has been a large number of tracking studies done in Africa, which is really encouraging to see. There are a number of those listed there that sort of did a sort of followed a Pan-African approach to this. And the map that you see there is from Kane et al. That sort of summarizes the gyps vulture movements up until about 2 years ago from tracking studies that have been done in Africa. But what is also evident from that, though, is that there are numerous gaps still in the landscape where we have very little knowledge of the movementology of vultures in East and Southern Africa in particular, and very, very little work has been done in West Africa to date, and obviously lots of opportunity for expanding work into those regions also. So the question is then, how is this relevant to combating wildlife poisoning in particular? How can we use this to reduce impact on vultures in particular? We have used the data that we have compiled over a period of 30 years from the African Wildlife Poisoning Database to guide our decisions in terms of the work that we do to combat wildlife poisoning in particular. And the map that you see here is a map derived from this data that indicates to us very clearly what we currently know about poisoning hotspots, in particular areas that could affect vultures also. And that, to a very large extent, then guides our decisions in terms of where to target the work that we want to do. This map here indicates then where we have conducted, together with a range of partners, wildlife poisoning response training with conservationists, law enforcement people, veterinarians, etc., currently to the extent of more than 6,500 people in 16 countries across Africa. The training focuses on enabling people to better identify poisoning and then to appropriately do work to try and reduce the impact, manage scenes, clean them up to prevent further poisoning, and thereby reducing the prevalence and the impact of the poisoning, reducing mortalities. Despite the extensive training done and the capacity that's been developed across, in particular, East and Southern Africa and lately West Africa, it is still a huge challenge to detect poisoning incidents in good time and then to adequately respond to them. The reason for that is just the geographical scope of what we are trying to undertake, a massive landscape to work on that in many cases is sparsely populated, and incidents still, to a certain extent, are often go either undetected or it takes weeks or months before these incidents are discovered. And by that time, literally hundreds of animals, and in particular hundreds of vultures, are killed in these incidents. So it's therefore critical that we try and improve our capacity to detect these incidents a lot sooner than what was currently the case. We have therefore designed a system called the Eye in the Sky, which has been under development since 2012. It sort of is work that, and similar work's been done by a range of other people elsewhere, both in Africa and outside. Think about the paper that was published by Stoyanov et al. in 2020, where they successfully used tracking to detect poisoning incidents in the Balkans, for instance. In our case, we make use of satellite PTTs, preferably because of the poor GSM or cell phone network across the landscape. All of those units ideally should be fitted with both mortality sensors and accelerometers that provide us with very clear signatures and alarms in terms of mortality of vultures that could happen. We fit these units to the birds using a backpack harness, and we prefer to target adult and sub-adult birds due to their more restricted movements in particular areas that therefore give us greater or better indication within a particular geographic area compared to immature and juvenile birds that tend to roam the landscape far more extensively. Of course, it's a fairly costly undertaking. There are monthly download fees, field work and fitting costs, but of course, these tracking units are rather expensive. So it is, from a financial point of view, a fairly ambitious undertaking, and funding is always a challenge. A key element of the work that we do is to identify and then closely work with and develop capacity with on-the-ground partners in each of the countries that we are currently working in. The work and the data that we derive then from this tracking is integrated into various software systems such as EarthRanger, Smart and Seymour platforms that enable managers on the ground to daily monitor the movements of the birds within their particular area of focus, and then to follow up on alarms and also feeding signals, which will enable them to ground truth and go and investigate if a poisoning incident, for instance, is suspected. That is done through a dashboard that's been designed that guides managers and will indicate alarms to them, but also particular movements that could relate to feeding, etc., that they then can follow up on. This map is just an illustration of the location of the various tracking samples that we were able to establish this year. That shows you where the birds are, where we have been able to fill knowledge gaps in terms of movement, and where the birds are currently used to indicate poisoning incidents and other aspects, as I will expand on just now. So what are the trends and results that we see after less than a year of using this tracking data and implementing the system in various locations in Africa? It's a little bit premature to start measuring substantial impact, but we can already see that track vultures are effective indicators of poisoning incidents in the landscape. To date, 13 incidents have been identified. We were able to mobilize people on the ground to attend to those incidents a lot more rapidly. They were able to identify animals that were still alive. They were taken in for treatment and then subsequently released after successful treatment. And then also from these incidents, we have seen that the mortalities that are recorded are significantly reduced due to the fact that people can get to these incidents a lot quicker after they've been identified through the interpretation of the movement patterns or through the alarms that are received from the tracked individuals. Other management benefits that also accrues from the use of these track vultures to conservation managers on the ground is identification of trends, identification of hotspots in terms of where the vultures feed, where animals are often snared and killed for other purposes. Through the work that's been done, very often when they find carcasses, they will locate snares, traps, etc., and hundreds of these have been removed in the last 2 months in the areas where we use these track vultures. They do detect large carcasses in particular. The movement patterns there are very, very specific and very obvious. And when managers go and investigate those, they will find reasons for mortalities. It could be, illegal hunting. It could be a disease, etc. And we've also seen in 2 incidents, at least, that the birds were indicators or early indicators of the outbreak of diseases in Africa in various locations. What has also been done is a greater interest in sort of comparing and looking at how vulture movements relates to the movements of other animals in the landscape, in particular large carnivores, lions, etc., and how the vultures then follow these animals in pursuit of finding food, but likewise also other animals that are potentially a source of food, like large herds of herbivores like buffalo, etc. It's often seen that these birds know where these herds are. They follow these herds because that's very likely where mortalities can occur for whatever reason. And that also assists managers to get on the ground and intervene if intervention is necessary. So what are our current plans with regards to the system that's been developed? We are aware of at least 3 other similar systems that are active or under development in Africa. And I think it's critical that we engage with each other and start looking at integrating these systems to come up and work with an effective system that works across the entire landscape, at least at this stage, across East and Southern Africa. We are planning to have a discussion in this regard at the Pan-African Ornithological Congress in November 2022, and hopefully we will be able to have a constructive discussion to be able to establish a system where all of us can pool data and work together to develop a system that effectively works across most of the landscape. It's very important for us to also work with people on the ground. It's critical that we have and continue to expand on our network of partners on the ground that can do ground truthing, that provides us with effective feedback so that we can improve our system as much as possible. We are currently within our project planning to deploy at least 200 units by the end of 2023 on vultures. And of course, as the bigger the tracking sample is, the more data you will get, and the bigger the chances are that you will detect these incidents as and when they happen. Obviously, we plan to continue to improve the system, and very importantly is to manage awareness on how these systems work and what they are used for. So in conclusion, one can say that we have learned that vulture tracking and movement data does have multiple possible uses beyond just biological movement studies. It can assist conservationists and others on the ground to make better informed management decisions. And if it is then necessary to intervene sooner than what we have done in the past, it also will reduce the impact of mortality factors and save lives, not just of vultures, but also of other wildlife. And it will have a positive impact on populations over a wide geographical range. I would like to thank you for listening and thank our partners and our donors who have been working closely with us across East and Southern Africa to bring about the change that we have through the implementation of the system. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Elżbieta Ket from WWF Greece. On behalf of my colleagues from Hellenic Ornithological Society, Bulgarian Society for the Protection of Birds, and Natural History Museum of Crete, I'm going to talk about the use of detection dogs against wildlife poisoning in the Balkans. Poison baits are considered to be the major threat and cause of death of many vultures and other wild species in the Balkan Peninsula. Although the use of poison baits is illegal in the Balkans, it is still very common practice, killing many vultures, including the Egyptian vulture, the species threatened with extinction. As you can see in this table, there are many documented incidents, but in our opinion is just the tip of the iceberg. Also, you can see that in Greece and Serbia, the problem is more frequent, but the more you look, the more you find. The last decade, especially in Greece, a huge effort to address poisoning has been invested, and that's why the number is higher. How to deal with this invisible crime, random in place and time, how to detect poison baits, hidden mines somewhere there in the countryside. Is it like finding a needle in a haystack? Is there any solution, a tool, maybe a superhero? Hopefully, we might have the solution. Dogs with a superior sense of smell that contribute to wildlife conservation. For sure, in finding poison baits in animals, they perform much better and more efficiently than us humans. The use of anti-poison dogs has been implemented since many years in countries as Spain, Portugal, and Italy, proving the efficiency of dogs. In last decade, more units were created in Hungary, Greece, and Bulgaria, and very recently, units were created in Czech Republic, Austria, and Slovakia. I will focus my talk on the Balkans, where from 2014 to 2021, 8 units were created, 7 in Greece and 1 in Bulgaria, in the frame of different, mostly live projects. The training of handlers and dogs was carried out by professionals from Spain, Hungary, and Greece. The units work in important areas for 4 vulture species and other rare birds of prey in western and central Greece, in Thrace, on 2 islands, Crete and Rhodes, and in South Bulgaria. They are operated by private individuals, NGOs, and hunting federation, in collaboration always with relevant authorities. The main goals of the units are prevention, detection, and removal of poison-baited animals from the countryside. The patrols are mainly carried out when there is any poison suspicion or incident reported through the active informative network comprised of relevant authorities, land users, as livestock breeders, farmers, hunters, and citizens. Less often, patrols of preventive character are conducted. Before every patrol, the handlers need to inform relevant authorities. Also, they need to investigate the incident for possible motive, how many baits or animals and where were found, and also they need to plan how the area will be searched. But during the patrol, the dog is in charge because it's 100% autonomous, but is the handler who is gonna evaluate the findings are following a detailed protocol. Unfortunately, the teams have a lot of work. As you can see, many patrols and kilometers were covered, many incidents were investigated, more than 500 poison animals and almost 700 poison baits were detected. By removing all these findings, a vicious circle of poisoning was stopped and no more animal got poisoned. The use of poison baits is non-selective and affects both wildlife and domestic animals. Around 56% of poison animals belong to domestic ones and around 44% to wildlife. The most common species detected was the dog, shepherd or hunting, with 245 dead individuals. So as you can see, the use of poison baits has serious impact on people and their economic activities. We know some livestock breeders who lost all their guardian dogs. Total of 124 carnivores as fox, that is the second common species detected. Wolf, wildcat, golden jackal, and marten were found poisoned. 53 birds of prey were found, to which of them 31 were vultures. The use of poison baits happen all year long, with some peaks in spring and late summer and autumn. But when we split the areas, we can see that on mainland there are more incidents during the spring, and on islands there are more incidents in autumn. The main suspected and possible motive for poison bait use were large predator control, fox control, and extermination of dogs, either shepherd, hunting, or stray dogs. If we talk about the poison bait type, there is a huge variety and imagination of poisoners. The most often used was a small piece of meat, a cyanide capsule, or whole carcass. Toxicological analyses were carried out in almost 70% of all incidents, finding that the most common substances used were cyanide and a few pesticides, most of which are illegal or internationally banned, such as endosulfan, methomyl, forate, carbofuran. What makes us think that there is a black market of these substances and really free access to obtain so toxic poison as cyanide that is dangerous to human as well. There are still many toxicological analyses ongoing due to lack of labs and qualified staff. Apart from the information provided through the active stakeholder network, poison incident detection also improved in the past years thanks to GPS transmitters mounted on vultures and other large eagles. In this way, the teams have increased their efficiency and more poison incidents could be investigated. Following the success of the dog units as an innovative and preventive tool against poisoning, this year in Greece, more units were created that belong to the Ministry of Environment and Energy, to Natural Environment and Climate Change Agency. 4 dogs and handlers were already trained, and 3 more units will be created until the end of the year. The operation of anti-poison dog units in the Balkans provided the chance to highlight and assess the problem of poison baits. Prompt removal of poison baits and animals from the countryside seems to be the most direct and effective way to reduce the risk of wildlife poisoning. But although in almost 50% of incidents a complaint was filed, no case managed to reach the courtroom. So we must not forget that the dog units are just a tool in the fight against poison baits and not the solution for the problem. There is a huge need for active involvement of governmental institutions and proper incident investigation at all stages, because our final goal is to bring a perpetrator to court. And now I would like to introduce you our 4-legged colleagues, these amazing dogs that dedicate their lives to save wildlife. Our ladies first, girl power. And here we have our gentlemen. And at this point, we would like to thank all relevant authorities and all citizens of the countryside for their cooperation and essential information provided all these years. Without them, we couldn't be so effective. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Uroš Pantović from the Vulture Conservation Foundation, and I will briefly present the current situation with wildlife poisoning in the Balkan Peninsula that VCF is working on. Primarily, VCF is working on anti-poisoning actions in the Balkan region through the implementation of the Balkan Detox Life project. And one of the main aims of the project is to increase and improve available information about the scope of the problem of wildlife poisoning in the region and the negative effects that it has on wildlife and human health. So we try to provide a clear and up-to-date overview of the current situation of this illegal practice by analyzing all available data that we were able to acquire for the period of 2000-2020 in order to establish a baseline for monitoring of the impact that actions implemented within this project and other similar conservation initiatives have towards diminishing the threat of poisoning in the region. This is a collaborative effort made by all the project beneficiaries of Balkan Detox Life. Currently, the most common type of wildlife poisoning in the Balkan Peninsula is the intentional placement of poison baits for the purpose of killing unwanted animals, both wildlife and domestic animals. Poison baits are very diverse in the Balkan Peninsula, and this practice is illegal in all of the countries according to the existing national legislation, but it is still a deeply rooted one and very commonly practiced, and still leads to mortality of various species of wildlife. Within the research period, we were able to acquire information about 1,046 poisoning incidents. More than half of them relate to Greece, while about 30% of the remaining relate to Serbia. This distribution of data can be mainly attributed to the fact that the reality of wildlife poisoning is that the more efforts you invest into its research, the more results or the more incidents you will record. So this is also true for the spatial distribution of data among the different Balkan countries. The most common victim of wildlife poisoning within this period was the griffon vulture, which basically perished in every fifth poisoning event in the Balkans, and a total of 400 individuals perished within this period. Griffon vulture is followed by common buzzard and red fox, which also get poisoned in quite large numbers every year, and also species like white-tailed eagles, marsh harriers, wolves, and golden jackals. Generally, avian scavengers are the group of species which suffer the most from this illegal practice, and they are recorded as casualties in every fourth incidence. So within this 20-year period, just over 450 vultures perished in the Balkan Peninsula, and these are not estimates, but concrete data obtained from poisoning and presumable poisoning incidents. So we conclude that on average, according to the data, about 23 vultures are poisoned annually in the region. And if we take into account that about only 20% of incidents are actually recorded and documented, the estimated numbers in reality are much, much higher. So from the analyzed data, we can see that during this period, poisoning generally shows an upward trend, and with the highest peak recorded in 2018. The following 2 years, as you can see, are clearly showing signs of decline. However, future data that will come after the implementation of the project will validate if this is an actual trend or not. The majority of better documented incidents indicate that conflicts with mammalian predators are the most common sources of wildlife poisoning, and the damages that these animals cause to livestock practices, agricultural production, and to game animals in commercial hunting areas. The second most important source of poisoning is the misuse or the improper use of phytosanitary products in agriculture. The most common substances for poisoning are carbamates in the Balkans, particularly carbofuran, but also metamil. And it's important to mention that potassium cyanide also has a significant contribution in this practice, being responsible for about 11% of the total poisoning events, although it is mostly used in Greece. So wildlife poisoning clearly continues to be the most dominant threat for many wild species, particularly vultures and other avian scavengers in the Balkan Peninsula. It's important to highlight that less than 1% of poisoning incidents, these that we have shown, are ever make it to court trials, and even less of them get sanctioned. So it is evident that this practice continues to be one of the most important threats, primarily due to low awareness, insufficient engagement of the relevant governmental authorities, vague legislation, and also lack of resources and capacity of the relevant authorities. The Balkan Detox Life project aims to secure engagement of the relevant institutions for combating wildlife poisoning by increasing their capacity for providing specialized training programs like the Wildlife Crime Academy, and by formalizing national anti-poisoning working groups in all the target countries, which are comprised of representatives from all the relevant institutions, which work together towards reinforcing their capacities by, for example, by developing and adopting 3 standard operational protocols for investigation of poisoning incidents, and also to strengthening institutional efforts by adoption of national anti-poisoning roadmaps, which provide a strategic framework and an action framework on how to tackle these threats in all the countries in the years to come. Thank you for your attention.
Hello again. Welcome back to the Q&A session. Thank you very much to our presenters. We just heard really nice, interesting roundup from around the world with really nice topics regarding the poisoning. as a threat. Now we have some questions for our presenters, and I'm gonna ask them to join us here on the main stage and to answer the questions that have been posted for them. So we have the first questions goes for Victoria, and it is namely, can you give me more explanation and for the personal dispute like means to kill persons or just animal?
So it's personal dispute. So it would be two people that for some reason are, don't get along together. And the way of solving the problems is trying to kill the dog of this other person. So it's not that they're trying to kill each other. They just directly put poison for this other person's dog, for instance.
Okay, thanks, Vic, for the answer. There is one more for you though, and it is how much fladrys and foxlight would stand the outdoor conditions, and is there a special way to mount the foxlights? For example, distance between lights, height of installment, etc.
Okay, so especially for foxlights, they're really very easy to install. You just put it like on a pole at a normal height, like a person's height, shall we say, more or less. There's two different versions of foxlights. There's that work with batteries and that work with solar panels. So the ones that we use were with solar panels, so they can just last forever, theoretically, until there's some kind of technical problem. And regarding the fladrys, we did try two different methods, two different types of material, because due to the heat and the sun, the first type of material that we used was like plastic. So it was, even though it was theoretically UV resistant, they didn't really resist the Greek sun and the summer. But now we tried a new type of material, which is just like fabric, really thick fabric. And this seems to be lasting really longer, and we're having no problems. So they can last for months, they can last for years.
Well, that's really useful information that everybody can actually apply. Thanks for your nice and like really good answer. So we have a question that goes for Ella, and is there any training manual for dogs to detect poisons?
Hi everybody. So there is no manual. The training is okay. It's quite hard, but it should be carried out, of course, by professionals, trainers. So there is no manual, but the training is based on positive reinforcement and on detection substances. So poison, mostly it's a substance, so it's not difficult for a professional to do it. But for us, as we are not professional, I wouldn't say that we need a manual, because it's easy to have a manual and train a dog. No, there's no manual. But professionals, they know how to train dogs, because it's a illegal substance. So either dogs, they are trained for drugs or for any other illegal substance, is the same way of training. Of course, it's the most important thing in this training for the anti-poison dogs is, of course, not to eat poison bait. So also it's a huge part of the training, but it's a really strict protocol. And of course, professionals, they sit and train well the dogs.
Okay, thank you very much, Ella. So we have several questions that go to Andre and Ivo Angelov. Unfortunately, they're not available and at the moment, because they're outside and in remote areas. So with poor connection to the internet. However, they have provided us with some answer to the questions that were asked about their presentations. The questions for Ivo regarding the poisoning of dogs. goes. There is one question with kind of two parts of the question. So the first part is, can we talk about a significant reduction in poisoning of wildlife / Egyptian vultures due to culling of stray dogs? And the second part of this question is if the dogs are being culled with a different method than poisoning. So regarding the second part of the question, Ivo's answer is that dogs are also being just shot, but mostly poison is used. And also regarding the first part of the question is also Ivo answers that of course this depends on the site and also on the local authorities. And of course, there are different ways that they follow to do it. We will be able to provide more information later on. The questions that were asked about Andres' presentation are: in which countries do you plan to tag 200 vouchers? And also the other one, the second question to Andre is, how many rapid response teams do you have that can respond to suspicious satellite fixes? We have short answers to these questions. So the tags are in Mozambique, Malawi, also Uganda, Botswana, and Namibia. 100 tags have been deployed so far, and there will be extension for tagging birds in 4 other countries. These are the answers that we managed to get from Andre so far. I hope you're glad with the answers provided by our dear presenters. Of course, if you have more answers, you can always, if you have more questions, you can always post it here in the discussion forum, and we'll be back to you as soon as possible with the answers. Now, just because we are pressed also by the time, I would like to thank you for joining the threats poisoning session. However, it's now time for a break, so please return to your timeline using the return to timeline button in the top left of your screen. And at the end of the break, of course, please don't forget to join the engagement with the community in 15 minutes from your timeline. Thank you very much.